genre probably matters greatly to readers because it helps them sort of sort out what they're looking for and, their comfort zones and stuff. I don't think genre matters to writers at all. Certainly, it doesn't matter to me because every time I've written a book and thought, oh, I have written a book in X genre, everyone has come along and said, no, that's not the genre this is. It's actually this. And most of the time, no matter what the fuck I think it is, they're just slapping a grimdark label on it. I'm like, yes, but everyone's trying their best to do the thing. And, it's not morally gray at all, but still, because, it's me. It's like, this is grimdark.
Well, I recently learned that genre matters even more than I thought because I was having a conversation with friends about like authors and marketing and stuff. And to my mind, I was like, if I find an author that I like, I will follow them across any genre. Like the genre tags don't matter to me at all. And I thought that was the norm. But apparently, I've been told and greatly shooketh by the fact that, yeah, people do really, like, some readers really need their genres to be pretty clearly defined, and they'll stay there. They'll stay in those borders.
Probably a good case in point in terms of where you start. So obviously, starting with military sci-fi, a lot of the readers in that genre stick to that part of it. That it's almost a segment, isn't it, rather than a niche. And when I wrote 8 books very quickly. And published them very quickly. And when that was done, I was at the point where I needed to go and try something else. My audience wasn't.
What is up, everybody? You're listening to episode 162 of SFF Addicts. I'm your host for today, Greta Kelly, and welcome to your weekly dive into the world of science fiction, fantasy, and writing craft. If you can believe it or not, MJ and Adrian let me run the ship alone today, so say a prayer. But you can still go and support my co-hosts by checking out their books. We've got The Tales of Tomorrow duology from MJ, and of course, Mushroom Blues from Adrian. And of course, if you're looking for any heist and hijinks in your fantasy, go check out my most recent book, The Queen of Days. Quick note before we get started, you can also support SFF Addicts on Patreon for a ton of cool extras like bonus episodes, author readings, and so much more. So go check the links in the description to help us do what we do here. And of course, new patron shout out, Nicholas Fuller with the $40 highest tier. Thank you so much, Nicholas. We love you and keep watching. Also, don't forget to rate and review the podcast on your favorite podcast app and subscribe to the FanFiAddict YouTube channel where this and every other episode of the show is available in full video. And now, welcoming to SFF Addicts, the participant of today's Indie Appreciation Month panel. Joining us to discuss discovering your genre and niche, we have Michael R. Fletcher, Krystle Matar, and Nick Snape. Welcome to the show, guys. How are you all doing?
Your opening is so professional that Mike and I are really caught off guard. It's like, oh my God, there's like a script.
I might have to leave.
Yeah.
Well, come on, guys. We can turn this around.
Yeah, absolutely. With the slightest amount of effort, we absolutely will.
Before we dig deeper into the episode, a quick word from our sponsor. Welcome to Transference, where death and sickness are but a distant memory. Nicholas Five Boroughs is a sicko. Someone that takes on others' illnesses. In a city where diseases can be transferred, the rich buy longer lives without pain, and the poor get a short life of constant sickness. Brought back from the brink of death by his friend Brian Meadowhearth, or maybe the invisible hand of an outside actor, Nick finally gets the chance to try and change things, to finally stop the whole disease transfer network. Tensions escalate as Nick infiltrates a higher society he doesn't understand and starts to fall for Dorothy Sungate, the very person he needs to manipulate to be successful. And between run-ins with a talking cat, genetically modified humans, and a robotic police force, The world around him just keeps getting stranger. Can Nicholas tear down the disease transfer architecture? And how much of his humanity is he willing to bargain along the way? A dystopian vision of healthcare and a market economy. Transference will appeal to fans of Red Rising, Blade Runner, and the BioShock franchise. Soon to be a complete duology with the release of Transcendence in the summer of 2025. Transference by Ian Patterson is available now in paperback and ebook. Get your copy today. And now, enjoy the rest of this episode of SFF Addicts.
Well, let's dive into some audience introductions. So can you tell us all a little bit about yourself and your books? Krystle, why don't you kick us off?
Okay, so hi, my name is Krystle Matar. Mike and I host a considerably less professional podcast series called The Dripping Bucket, where we focus on SFF, obviously, but we try to get on like artists and editors and, kind of talk about the whole sphere. And that's currently on hiatus, so I don't know why I'm plugging it, man. Your professionalism inspired me to try it. Now I'm giving up. I also write books. So my debut, Legacy of the Brightwash, was a SFF 7 finalist, a BBNYA finalist, and an Indie Ink Award finalist. So I'm very proud of that. It's getting old now, though. It's like 4 years old. And then the hefty sequel that's quite beaten up because I just finished reading it myself to remind myself what happens in my own book is Legacy of Brick and Bone. So yeah, those are both available. We just finished the Kickstarter for the special edition or the deluxe edition of Brightwash. So the Pledge Box store is still open in case anybody wants to get a really nice copy of Brightwash and or the really cool swag that the good folks at Merrick Books helped me brainstorm.
Perfect. So. Yeah, I think we'll be able to put that linked in the description below. So if anyone's interested in checking out that beauty, go for it. Michael, speaking of your podcast, anything else you want to add about yourself?
He's got books and stuff, I think.
Yeah, I have written books. Yeah. So I've got 3 finished trilogies, somewhere between 3 and 5 other like standalones and novellas, some co-written with people, Anna Smith Spark, Clayton Snyder. And yeah, I've been published since 2013. So I am super old.
I've seen things. How about you, Nick? Can you give a little bit of introduction?
Hi, I'm Nick Snape. I'm a multi-genre, I suppose. I write science fiction and fantasy and a bit of sci-fi or not so hope punk, if you like, within that mix. I have no podcast to my name, hiatus or not, but generally I write stuff that's for the last few years that's been reasonably popular in the military sci-fi, and I've just branched out from there. So the last series that I've started writing is The Wrecking Squad, which is a bit like Expanse meets Firefly with a bit of aliens thrown in. I'm close to completing the Dragon. I'm close to completing my fantasy. I've got A Queen in Blood coming out soon and a new cover for this on the 11th of July, which is superb. Looking forward to that. And then my oldest set of books, which is the Weapons of Choice, which is an 8-book military sci-fi with a twist. And that's where I'm at in those terms. So.
Awesome. This is going to be a good panel. I think we've got a nice range of experiences here. I think it's always helpful to start things off as simply as possible in case there are any newbies out there in the audience. So very quickly, how do you define the differences between genre and niche? And why do you think genre matters at all, or does it matter to readers? Michael, you want to give that one a crack?
So yeah, I think genre probably matters greatly to readers because it helps them sort of sort out what they're looking for and, their comfort zones and stuff. I don't think genre matters to writers at all. Certainly it doesn't matter to me because every time I've written a book and thought, oh, I have written a book in X genre, everyone has
readers
come
tell
along
you.
and said, no,
Yeah.
that's not the genre this is. It's actually this. And most of the time, no matter what the fuck I think it is, they're just slapping a grimdark label on it. I'm like, yes, but everyone's trying their best to do the thing. And, it's not morally gray at all, but still, because, it's me. It's like, this is grimdark.
I mean,
so grand.
Yeah. Go ahead, try and write a genre, just be prepared to fail.
yeah.
What do you think, Krystle? You agree?
Yeah, well, I recently learned that genre matters even more than I thought, because I was having a conversation with friends about like authors and marketing and stuff. And to my mind, I was like, if I find an author that I like, I will follow them across any genre. Like, the genre tags don't matter to me at all.
Mhm.
And I thought that was the norm. But apparently, allegedly, I've been told and greatly shooketh by the fact that, yeah, people do really, like, some readers really need their genres to be pretty clearly defined, and they'll stay there. They'll stay in those borders, which makes me probably uniquely unsuited to market to them, because genre is almost an afterthought to me. Like, often it just feels like set dressing in a very good way. I enjoy certain set dressings, but to me, the voice and the author matters a lot. So that makes it harder for me to sort out where my boundaries are.
Oh, what do you think, Nick? And what do you think draws readers to genre fiction in the first place? While we're talking about genre,
I think it's probably a good case in point in terms of where you start. So obviously, starting with military sci-fi, a lot of the readers in that genre stick to that part of it. That it's almost a segment, isn't it, rather than a niche. And when I wrote 8 books very quickly, and published them very quickly. And when that was done, I was at the point where I needed to go and try something else. My audience wasn't. So when I went off and wrote some solo hope, not so much punk work in books, I wrote a couple of those. I mean, the audience didn't come. So we had to go out and find them all over again. And then that was the same in terms of going on to something to dark fantasy, or almost like an arcane punk type style book, which again, another different niche. But for me, I needed to do it. I needed to go off and learn more than the niche I'd started in, because it is quite specific. And at the same time, try and learn how to garner an audience in a different way. So I think readers are very, in that genre, are very specific. I do think in many ways, the other areas I've tried, probably you can draw people into in terms of the niches that are buried within it, and you can try and target those. But that isn't so easy as well, if your niche isn't a popular one, if it hasn't already got someone who's clicked into it and started it off. So I think,
yeah, that's tricky.
From that point of view, it's tricky bringing that audience with you. I've tried it. I needed to do it for me, because I've gone back to the action sci-fi type style with the new series, and I find I'm writing in a different way, and the audience is trickling back, shall we say, from that point of view, because it's new and they've begun to read it, and the feedback has been, yeah, where have you been? Why did you
I've been over in those other genres. If you want, yeah.
It's hard, because I think a lot of new authors do get that advice of like, find your lane and stick to it. And I think as writers, a lot of us want to experiment with other things. Michael, you talked about always being stuck in grimdark. Have you ever wanted to just flip the script and do something completely different?
I mean,
I do. I've written a middle grade fantasy, a real world horror novel, cyberpunk, heroic fantasy. However, everything just gets hurled into the grimdark sort of. As soon as they see the name, they're like, "Wow, it's grimdark."
Part of that has got to be a little bit chicken and egg situation, at least for you specifically, because there's the lore that Blackstone Heart started out as like YA or something, or middle grade.
Yeah, I thought I was writing
definitely
YA
not.
Oh, yeah.
Like, it is absolutely not. And so there's got to be a bit of chicken and the egg situation for you specifically, because of how you approach each time you try a different genre. You are still bringing that core of Yeah, that's a Michael Fletcher. You know what I mean? So it might not entirely be your reader's fault, is what I'm saying.
You're saying it's my fault.
Shots fired, Krystle.
No, well, not entirely. I'm saying like 50-50 split here. Shared culpability.
Well, Krystle, which genre did you fall in love with first, and is it the one that you're now writing in?
Well, that's a hard question. So my first fantasy genre that I fell in love with was David Gemmell, and so he's he is like a traditional heroic fantasy, but he kind of started the path towards a darker kind of fantasy, in that, you know, his heroes are never morally clean. It's always, he's always playing with those shades of gray, especially when it's coming to soldiers and trauma of war. And so on that note, I'm definitely walking the same path, maybe a little bit further down than he ever did, but it's that it is a love letter to the genre, but also carrying some heavy baggage with it. Although as I said, I'm kind of a multi-genre reader, so there's a lot of other influences in there. So the answer is yes, and I guess that yes, it's heavily influenced by, you know, the stuff that I was reading as a young teenager, but also heavily influenced by the other genres that I've picked up along the way without fully realizing that I was doing it.
It's always sneaky that way. Nick, you
Yeah.
mentioned your first book was military sci-fi. Was that what you had grown up reading and loving, or is it just what happened when you sat down to write?
I don't think military sci-fi existed when I started reading, to be honest with you. I think I probably started reading Alistair MacLean, which you could account as military thrillers, I suppose, but quickly switched from those to science fiction and the Bradburys and that type of thing. It wasn't really until my late teens when I started into fantasy, and that's obviously Tolkien would be a start point, but I went into Michael Moorcock and the Eternal Champion books, which are you wouldn't probably count them as grim dark, but there was certainly a weird genre at the time. It's anti-hero fantasy in many ways, but that's probably been the heaviest influence on where I wanted to be able to write. Being able to write fantasy is a different thing altogether, because that takes planning, spreadsheets, thinking, which I don't think I was ready for when I started.
Surely.
Yeah, all those things.
Surely military sci-fi also needs quite a lot of that.
Don't mind. So basically, from that point of view, my approach to it was basically I avoided anything to do with spaceships, and we focused on people and character dynamics and all that type of thing. So, which very much was where Alistair MacLean would have been in terms of how he wrote, or it would have been Bradbury and those types of people. It was character based. It was all that type of thing. But it's from there really that I needed to try something, not with simplistic is not the right term, but it's very character driven around a simple plot structure that then expanded and expanded and expanded. It's probably that expansion. My first book was 60,000. The last book was 130,000 words. It kind of like grew as the complexity of what I was writing grew. And it was at that point when I thought, I can do all the genres. I need to go and try it. So it's, that's where my love developed from. Again, from the thriller through to the sci-fi, through to the fantasy, and then the complexity of morally grey, I suppose you'd call it, but characters that had to have flaws, can't be perfect.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, nothing interesting about a Mary Sue, I think. How about you, Michael, when you were growing? I suppose grimdark is relatively new, but what were you reading when you were young, and did that translate at all into your early books?
Like Nick, I was reading a lot of Michael Moorcock, the Elric's books, Stormbringer, just a ton of early fantasy, usual David Eddings, Hugh Cook, all the sort of what's classic fantasy now. I never thought of myself, I never have never attempted to write a grimdark novel. To me, like Beyond Redemption, it was just a dark fantasy novel. I'd never heard of grimdark. But yeah, it was very much along the lines of, Michael Moorcock. anti-heroes, flawed characters. The Obsidian Path trilogy really is like thinly veiled Stormbringer fanfic that's sort of done surprisingly well. So yeah, I am writing a lot of. I'm taking sort of classic fantasy and then bringing it, kicking and screaming into a sort of a more modern, aesthetic.
Yeah, making things change is always part of the fun, I think. I always like to talk a little bit about like the nitty gritty of the writing process itself, because like on a macro level, like it's easy to sit down and decide, all right, I'm going to write a fantasy book or I'm going to write a sci-fi book. But at what point do you think about subgenres when you're writing, or tropes that you want to play with and start thinking about niching down towards your audience? Is it something that you even think about at all when you're drafting, or is that for you something that happens when you're gearing up to actually have a release date and when you're doing your marketing? Nick, you want to start us off with that one?
You're probably the wrong person to ask. So, in terms of how I think, my books start with an idea and then it goes from there. And it kind of like your next layer and your next layer. I'm very much a pantser in terms of what I do. It's a 1-page plan, and we'll see where the characters take me. So what I've had to do to reel that into a degree is what the fantasy books really helped me to do was structure and order and plan and interweave what was going on, which is why they've taken so long to finally produce. But what that's helped me do is I go on into the back to the sci-fi is that I've now got in terms of that, I've got an idea what it will be by the end. So I've sat there with the idea of the Expanse, Firefly, Aliens mix. That's what it is. That's what it will be. And then that's provided, if you like, a cage around my wildest thoughts and weird tangents to keep me centralized where it's going. So I think for me, it's that has provided, if you like, market is the wrong point, but in a way, it's not. It's the niche isn't, if you like, the space opera genre or the political sci-fi or the action sci-fi. It is the fans of would like this, and that's what I've tried to do to keep my focus. And it's probably the first time I've written something in my mind, which is to market is the wrong thing, is molding what I do, character-driven sci-fi and science fiction, in with a dark twist, into something which is possibly I can describe rather than writing a description that I can't.
How about you, Krystle? What's your process look like?
Yeah, I'm kind of in that same lane where there wasn't a lot of intention when I started writing Brightwash, except that I wanted to come back to fantasy, but I also wanted to pay homage to kind of my long relationship with the main character, who I'd started writing as a teenager, and so he went through a lot of genres as I grew as a writer, and when it was time to go back to fantasy, then it was also time to bring him with me into the genre, and so it became kind of an assembly of all of those genres that had such a big impact on me. And I think it was only after the project was done that I was then able to step back and look at it and go, okay, so who am I selling this to? And it is very similar to what you said, Nick, where it's like, it's not so much that I chose a genre so much as I tried to imagine what other IPs would, be a comparison, and then what those inspirations were to me would potentially also, draw other people in. So a big inspiration was a show called Ripper Street that was on BBC. And it's
good.
very, yeah, Gaslamp, Victorian, and it's a cop drama in the Victorian era, and so that that becomes a genre niche for me. It's like, okay, well, that, but secondary world fantasy, and all of those little touch points that I hit along the way became marketing and genre and niche and comps, and I think I don't know that I would know how to do it the other way, where I chose a market to sell to, and then and then wrote to that market so much as I have to figure out what on earth I was thinking.
That's fair. Yeah.
Yeah.
Michael, what's your process like?
So yeah, zero thought to subgenre.
You
I
did
just
not
don't
put together a
care.
planning
Like,
panel.
yeah. So I write entirely to entertain myself. I write the idea that has been scratching at my brain for the last however many months, demanding to be written. And so honestly, I don't care about the subgenre. The readers are going to, slap their own labels on that anyway. If it's a fantasy that takes place on a ring world, what the fuck is that? I don't know. But if that's the idea that's sort of like just scraping at my brain, then that's what I'm writing. And if no one buys it and no one reads it, then I still had fun writing it.
That's a good attitude to have, because that's really all you can
It is.
control as writers, right? Is if
Yeah.
you're having fun having written it.
Yeah, this job, this idea, this hobby, this weird thing that we do for money is hard enough as it is if we're not actually enjoying the largest process, which is making the book. So yeah.
Well, I liked it that you mentioned earlier, Michael, how you thought you were writing YA, because I also went through a phase. I thought my first book was YA for sure. Only to be also told, no, what are you talking about? This is like a grown person's problems. And I think that's a lot like a trouble that a lot of newer authors have, is pinning down age category. What makes a book YA and not adult, or new adult instead of YA? So what do you guys think? Is it just, it's not as simple as the age of the main character, or is it? What do you think? Michael, have you learned anything from having gone through that?
So it really depends on the reader. So there are tons of adults who enjoy middle grade fantasy, who enjoy YA. There are kids who read adult fantasy. A writer friend of mine passed off Blackstone Heart to his 14-year-old son, and the kid loved it. And like, this is the book that I thought was like YA, and people were like, no, this is far too upsetting to be young adult. But a 14-year-old kid read it and was like, yeah, this is really cool. So that's it's all down to the reader. And those categories, they're for marketing books, which we're all really
it's for
bad
the
at.
store. Yeah,
It's
it's
for
not
the
as much
store.
for us.
Yeah.
They're not for writers.
Yeah.
What do you think, Krystle? I know you've got a number of children. Do you know what makes a difference?
It is really hard to tell. My big reader is, how old is she? She's 12 now, and she'll bounce between middle grade YA and adult. And it is really challenging to figure out what it is that makes the difference for her, because I think sometimes as adults we tend to not give young readers enough credit at what they're able to handle, both content wise and also like their intelligence level. Like if kids are inhaling books, like they're really smart, like they're really sharp, and they're able to grapple with really big ideas and really heavy things because they don't have to worry about paying the hydro and what the traffic's going to be like on the way to work. So like all of their brain capacity and the sponginess of their personalities is like focused on this and can really grapple with it in a way that I think adults we don't anymore as much. And so that makes the labels really hard and arbitrary, because it's more like a content list than that things that she doesn't want to read about than it is an age category. So I think it's for the stores to try to organize the books, and like we think maybe this is what it is, but other people have stronger opinions about what makes a YA than I do. So that's a harder one to pin down.
It is, especially because I feel like with kids, like there's a certain amount of not self-censoring, but like if they're not old enough to understand something, like they'll just kind of gloss over it.
Yeah, like if a book is too
quote unquote
drive
mature.
for her.
Yeah.
Yeah, she will self-select out as like, nah, I wasn't with that one, or no, that one was too heavy, too fast, and like she'll just put it right down. And I think that in itself is more important than what, because if she picks up something that's too much for her, she just knows herself well enough to know that this is not for me at this point in my life. But that's between me and her rather than her in the bookstore.
Right.
So,
Nick, how about you? Any ideas what marks the age category lines? Is it useful at all for authors to know, or just for readers?
I think it's very much a trad thing in terms of highlighting where they want to sell it and where it wants to go. I'm an ex-principal, so obviously working with children up until the age of 11, and those children's variety of readership goes from devouring Harry Potter to basically reading the very basic of books because that's where they're at. So in terms of understanding and maturity and expectation, it's a hierarchy of everything from the quality of what they read to the tropes that are going to be there to the things that they're interested in, and it's got to be there to support, I think, publisher, but also, if you like, in many ways the parenting that goes along with it about what they're ready for, what they can access, and the teachers and the librarians and all those people that need to support the process of getting the right books to the right child in the right genre, niche, trope, whatever, to keep the interest going, because books open minds. And it's part of that process, I think, of development. So though it's very hard to pin it down, I think without it we would maybe not as authors struggle, but I do think the readership and the parents and the adults buying and the children selecting, it helps that process.
I love that. That's
yeah,
really
it's
well
like
said.
it's a little bit like the pirate code, guidelines rather than actual rules. Yeah.
That's it. Yeah, it's a
Well, I know
rule
you
until
guys,
it's broken.
several of you have, yeah.
Yeah.
Several of you have mentioned this idea of writing to a market. And I know on the traditional side, the advice is always like, don't bother, because everything moves so slowly. By the time your book actually comes out, the market will have completely changed. Is that true on the indie side? Or I guess in a related way, are you creating your markets because you have the ability to be so experimental and creative when it comes to niching down into your subgenres? Krystle, what do you think?
That one definitely depends on the author. I could not write to market. I'm too slow. But
Slow.
yeah. Somebody like Ryan Cahill, he absolutely wrote to market, and he hit his market hard, and he never relented. And now he's kind of built a market around himself. And so and he went in kind of the opposite of us on the panel, that he knew exactly what he was going to write. He knew exactly who he was writing for, and he was focused on that, and through that he was able to do exactly what he set out to do. And then another big one is Carissa Broadbent. She is another one who also talks about, she knows exactly who her market is before she even writes the books now, and she hits hard, and she knows exactly what tropes that market wants, and she's able to capture that. And she was doing that as indie first, and then came over to the trad side. And so yes, absolutely it is possible, but not for me. I'm kind of playing in my little sandbox with my crayons, and eventually a book comes out and the market tells me what parts of it are marketable, and I just go forward.
Michael, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think you kind of nailed it when you said, are you creating your own sort of market niche? And that's kind of it. You know, there are enough humans out there buying books that if they find you, if the right people find you, you will have readers. And that's the tricky, difficult, impossible part is how do they find you? But like I don't advertise. For me, marketing consists of being random on various social media and posting like just whatever insanity is going on. And yet I sell books. This is call it a career, I guess. I don't know. And so it's, they have somehow found me through word of mouth, and, it took time, but I'm never going to write to market because the idea sounds very not fun. And as soon as it's not fun, I'll go do something else. So yeah, I think you wait for them to find you, and if you can figure out how to speed that process, awesome.
Yeah.
Nick, I have a feeling you're going to agree with Michael, but anything else to add on the idea of writing to market?
I think it's a strange thing, isn't it? Because I think where I am in terms of career is I'm swimming in the indie pool, if you like, and it's a very large indie pool, and it's very, very shallow and spread very, very wide. There are, I looked up how many niches there were in fantasy before we started, and there was talking of 50, but I could add at least 20, 30 on there of those people who have, in their mind what their book is and what they want it to be and how it is. And I do interact a lot with those people in terms of those authors and what they're trying to access, what audience they're looking for. And I think the difficulty is that now is that there are so many indie authors out there. It is easy to produce a book. I'm not saying it's easy to write a good one, but it is much more easy to produce a book that someone might read.
Yeah, produce and distribute. Yeah.
Yeah, that you are swimming against that tide, if you like. And it's how you can. I know how Michael put it. They may find you, they may not. But it's actually what floats to the top, and can you grab hold of that at that point in time in terms of marketing and niche and float with it. And that's the flexibility that
we are the scum floating towards
the yeah. That was the image that was coming to my mind, thinking, should I stop talking? From that point.
Just go with it.
I was go with raft, driftwood.
Yeah.
So in terms of that, you can potentially grab hold of that if it's a niche that you're interested in, that you want to write in. Because I think if you don't write with passion, if you don't write with interest, if you are going to write 24th book in your series, and you know that if you have to write the 25th, that will be the end of you. You need to be able to actually be flexible. Indies can be flexible. They can take that opportunity if it's of interest, if it's what they want to do. And is it 0.5%, 1%? Grab hold of that driftwood, right time, right place, and sell books. But there are lots and lots of books out there that don't sell, really good books that don't sell, because they haven't quite grabbed hold of that niche or floated to the top themselves as driftwood. So it's difficult, I think. And I've begun working with FanFiAddict in terms of doing blogs and reviews, and I found myself actually, do I go down and read what I'm interested in, which obviously I'm going to do, but then I've gone trad and indie with that. I am going to read that. If I'm going to highlight that, I am going to give that an opportunity to be seen, because it's worth seeing. However, whichever niche it may be in, and hopefully it'll drift a little higher.
Yeah, a good book is a good book, but it's hard to underplay like the role that luck can play in,
yes,
and what ends up being successful, which I think is hard. It's hard for me still, and I've been doing this for a while, but yeah. Now, when you actually like publish your own story, your books on the indie side, whether it's through KDP or Ingram Spark, I mean, you get the opportunity to kind of choose whatever category, subgenre, tropes. How does that process work? Krystle, can you let people like me who have no idea know what it looks like?
Yeah, well, so there's two different things that you're doing. One of them is that you're selecting your categories, which is which pages your books are going to be on. And the other one is that you're selecting your keywords, which is what words do you think people will be searching for in the search bar in order to find books like yours. And trial and error, baby. The categories is a little bit more cut and dry in that you want to try to find a wide one that has a lot, and you want to try to find a narrow one where you can rank well. and then I think you get 3, so then you're kind of splitting the difference on that third one. Using Nick as an example, military sci-fi is a very specific audience, and they probably go through that page themselves and like pick books that they like through military sci-fi. I'm listed in Gaslamp, I think, question mark. Oh man, it's been a while since I looked at the back end. And I'm also listed in military fantasy, and sometimes I rank really well there when I'm actually selling books. So it's just kind of knowing, if you look at the top, the top 10 page or the top 50, you kind of see what kind of books are doing well there, and you can kind of figure out like if do I slot in with those or not. And then the keywords, like I said, you're trying to anticipate what people are searching. And if those search words will feed your book up to the top, and they'll be happy. So that's where you get the really granular niche stuff like tropes and found family, or what am I
Or like some
I
of like
can't
the
even think
hyper
of.
specific like romance
Yeah.
tropes, like one bed at the inn or things like that.
Yeah, stuff like that, and like just single words that might, like dark, or for I'm trying to think. For Fletcher, you would probably do dark magic, maybe, like because you've got the necromancy in there. You'd probably put necromancy, like it's.
I just fill those categories with as many words as I can stuff in there.
Yeah,
Anything
exactly.
that kind of like seems to fit.
Yeah. Are
Yeah,
you able to
yeah.
change those after publishing, or is it you're kind of stuck?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yep, you can go in and change your back end info, and kind of experiment. And there's a whole platform called Publishers Rocket where you're able to like look up certain books and how many clicks they get, or certain keywords, how many clicks they get, certain books, and how many books you have to sell to rank well in those categories. And like,
Oh, that's good to know.
there's it is, but it also kind of becomes like, I am too tired. I was super into it like 3 years ago when Brightwash was pretty new and doing well. And like I knew my keywords and my categories and stuff, and now it's like I don't know, man. My kids are in school. I got
Life
I'm
eventually
thinking,
happens.
yeah, probably when I have the third book and or when I launch a new series, I'll be back into those.
Mm-hmm.
The scary back end stuff. It's like, okay, I got a new one now. I got to figure out where this is going. Yeah.
Nick, how do you find your keywords? Is it like just looking at other books? Is it just trial and error? What's your process?
I will be Publisher Rocket. That's where I will go because it's mainly because it's maintaining something that's up to date. Amazon like messing you about, and it also likes shifting your categories. So you might write down your categories where you think you are and try and publish it, but it will read your keywords and shift you. So some of my books are in colonization. Yeah, so colonization is basically full of 6-packs, alien horns and tentacles, and not mine. But that's where it will shift you
Perhaps
if it
not your
believes where you
audience.
should
Yeah.
be. Not my audience, no. But that's what they do. They shift you into there if that's where they think your keywords are or where your books popped up in the search engine. So you've just got to be really, really careful with it and be flexible and change them again. How much impact they have, I don't know. I think the biggest impact is when it comes down to what I don't use, which is Amazon ads. That's where the keywords are extremely powerful, and you'll find your book, once it's been searched on Amazon, surrounded by so many better ones than yours, all in your genre or niche, or luckily for me, barbarians with horns. So they'll tend to pick and choose, and you can get missed because of all of that. So picking your keywords is important, but I'm not so sure that people search so much now for books. I think they go by word of mouth. They go by what they've heard on TikTok. They'll go on what they've heard somewhere else, and because they trust that to a degree. And that's why I think a lot of what the Amazon does, as an example, is they'll switch and change and keep manipulating it to try and make it less predictable. So people aren't gaming the system, which happens. We will, because we would like to sell some books and make some money somewhere along the line, so we can write another one.
Yeah. Michael, do you give much thought into your SEO or keywords that you're putting up on your books?
No, unsurprisingly, no. I'm learning stuff here, though. So yeah, I had noticed that like I would suddenly be ranking in fantasy horror.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, the fuck?
That tracks for you.
Like, have I written a fantasy horror? Like, really? Okay.
Yeah, it does kind of track for you, because Grimdark ends up there often because of the body horror element, because there's no cat for Grimdark, so
Yeah,
it actually suits you.
Yeah, I'm not the sort of, maybe I'm not the typical reader. I have never looked for a book by entering a keyword and waiting to see what pops up, what suggestions.
Yeah.
I don't really believe that anyone does that.
Yeah, well,
you know,
Nick was saying that they don't anymore. So there was a time where
yeah, a long ago.
yeah,
So for me, all the genres, they're pretty vague. What your options in Amazon, so I'd throw in whatever seems to make sense. The keywords, I basically just list every cool aspect in the book and whatever. That whole process takes me about 30 seconds. So that's how much thought I'm putting into that. And then, the book is out there, and really I'm relying on word of mouth, and people are like, oh, that Fletcher guy writes fucked up book. What's he done this time?
Well, Nick, you had mentioned that you don't run Amazon ads, but do any of you do any paid advertising, whether on Amazon or BookBub or Instagram, anything like that?
Not yet.
Not yet.
I have heard the conventional wisdom is it's not really worth it until you have at least 3 books in your backlist. So
okay.
Yeah, even then, I have experimented with it off and on over the years. Every now and then I'll be like, what the hell? Let's throw a couple $100 at that. It has never paid off. And I don't know if that's Amazon's reporting system being just absolute garbage, or some other part of their process being garbage. But it's a fun way of giving Amazon more money.
Because that's what they need, really.
Yeah.
Well, I think a marketing tool that incorporates subgenre and niche quite a bit, but that we haven't talked about yet, is your back cover copy and the blurb that you use for the back of the book, as well as what actually appears on Amazon. Those synopses, I think, are so hard to write. Do you guys have any tips or tricks to how you go about crafting a synopsis that will grab people's attention instantly? Nick, any ideas?
Before I dive in, can I just go back to the bit about Amazon keywords? Is that all right?
Sure.
So the key thing I think that to get across is that it's often key phrases people type in. So it'll be a combination of words, and what Amazon will do, well, last time I looked, is they'll take that phrase and it will do it in any combination. So when you enter it into your 7 choices, if you're entering a key phrase, it will then, in any of those combinations, hopefully pop up your book. It's just that those combinations change in popularity. That was, I think, really where I was going with that. And if it comes to synopsis, I have written some notes for that. It says, and so the nightmare begins. I'm probably not the person to write in terms of synopsis, but I think if there's anything that I've picked up in the short time I've been doing this, is that book cover, synopsis, and ad, and I do Facebook ads for one series, have to match, because you will get clicks and they'll go there and they'll look at what you've written and they'll look at your ad and they'll look at your cover and they'll go, no, that doesn't match. That's not for me. And then that's gone. And so you've wasted that click, whatever else you want to do in terms of ads. So in those terms, I think it's just being very, very careful if you are going down the advertising line, which I have dallied with and generally got my money back, whilst gaining reviews and, if you like, reputation and other benefits that go with it, if they like the books occasionally. But generally what you get from a synopsis is that the book cover is dragging you to that synopsis. They read that, and to get to that book in the first place, they'll have done some searching along the line, possibly ads. If those 3 don't connect, it becomes a struggle. Writing a synopsis, however, is a dark art I have not mastered. So that's where my knowledge stops. I try different combinations. I haven't yet succeeded. The person who writes 3 lines and sells 1 million, I will never talk to again when I find them. I don't know how it happens, but it does. You can see it, can't you?
I think there's
I
like a
have no
devil in the
idea.
crossroads situation happening here.
I think, yeah. So I'm not probably the person to ask, but I do experiment with different styles. I do try and get leave them up, cry, change it. But no.
Crying is an important part of the process.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's underrated. Krystle, any words of wisdom about the back cover copy? Do you usually start with like a blurb from another writer? Does that help at all, getting blurbs? Or is it more about book description?
Yeah, well, actually, like as I think about it, on my Amazon page, I actually list the awards first, and then a blurb, and then the back cover copy, because I think word of mouth these days really is the biggest seller. And this is one where approaching the synopsises have been really hard for me, because I don't read them as a book buyer. I will, look at the cover, I'll look at the synopsis, it's gibberish, I'll look back at the cover, I'll open the book, and read, like, do I like their voice and stuff like that. So it was really hard to then transfer over, but the accumulated wisdom I've picked up from people, like either helping them, workshop their synopsises or having them help me, is that it's best to be concise. People worry about, putting down a spoiler in their synopsis, but they're so challenging of walking the line between being vague and being interesting. And so showing them to people and having them say, like, that I have no idea what this is saying is actually really helpful, because you can kind of whittle away, the unnecessary terminology and, stuff like that, and just hit the heart of what you think will be most interesting to an audience. And I don't think I did it in Brightwash, but for Brick and Bone, I had the opportunity to just put it in like a Discord server, and a lot of people that I didn't know, and kind of knew me by reputation, or knew Brightwash by reputation, actually were super helpful in that, like, if I saw that, they would say if I saw that synopsis, I would absolutely come in onto the series. And the big hook for that was conflict. The synopsis on the second book is about the conflict between the main character and the main crime boss. And that paired with boxing gloves on the cover was like, people wanted to read my book. So I was like, okay. So I guess my advice really is ask people who haven't read your book, because I think people who have read the book get too granular, and they want you to mention this or that or the other thing that's really interesting. But people reading your synopsis don't have that information. That's the whole point of it. So ask people who haven't read your book and see if it's a draw to them, rather than asking your beta reader.
That's a good point. Michael, any other tips for writing a killer blurb?
Yeah. So don't write a synopsis. A synopsis is basically talking about the story and what happens, and it's going to be super boring. That's why they're going to read the book. So you got to keep in mind, what is the purpose of the back of book copy? It's not to summarize the novel. No one wants to read that shit. It's to sell the novel. So what you're looking for is fast, punchy, well-written, nailing the feels. Anything else is kind of a waste of time to me. So for my best-selling book has the shortest synopsis, and it's literally like 30 or 40 words, and it's really, really freaking short. But that's the one that sells, and it tells you nothing about the story. There's no mention of plot, of what's going on. It's just like boom. And I think that's the job, which is, it's like writing a synopsis for an agent or prospective publisher. Summarizing your book, don't do it. It's that the purpose is to sell it. So sell the shit out of it.
Yeah, Krystle, I think you hit the nail on the head when you said it's about conflict, because that's what moves
Yeah.
the story and gives it all the feels. So that's a good tip. Well, I think we're going to be winding down here pretty quick. But before we do, can each of you offer up a final bit of genre-related writing advice for the indie authors in the crowd? Krystle, why don't you kick us off?
Oh no. Genre related writing advice. I think the less writing advice and more marketing advice would be people tend to think of comps as like some other book that exists that, you know, I may or may not have heard of. And, you know,
Or like
I'm
the
trying to
perfect
sell.
doppelganger of your book.
Yeah, yes, exactly. It's just like another book that exists exactly like my book. I think when, and I think authors do themselves a disservice by trying to narrow down their comps to something that's really specific, especially if they're mixing a lot of genres. And I think for comps, a better way to think about it would be your inspirations and what things came into the book, because those things will be felt in the book, and then you can use those inspirations, even if they're not in the same genre as you, as a talking point for your marketing. Because genre, I love genres, but it is set dressing for, you know, stories. And so if you get too specific about like, I need another book in this exact genre that does this exact thing, well, that might not exist because that's what you wrote. So you can step back a bit and go like, I was inspired by this show and that book and this movie, and those things can become comps. And it takes a little bit of the pressure off of finding the exact right book that's exactly the same as your book, which actually hopefully doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Hopefully you've come up with something a little bit original. So I think
I'm so glad you mentioned that, because I would just break out into hives thinking about trying to find comps for query letters when I was querying.
Yeah. You're trying to imagine like, okay, something that I wrote that's exactly the same but different, but
and within the last 5 years and not too successful.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But the thing is, the reason we write our books is usually because there's an itch that we're trying to scratch, and the book that we want to read doesn't exist, so we go and write it. So you can take those things that inspired you. Like I really like Ripper Street, but I love fantasy, and kind of put those things together, and those can be comps. Like we don't have to be so literal when trying to market our genres, especially when we're coming down into niches. Because it gets hard. Like the further down you go into that, you know, the rings of the niche, the harder it will be to find similarities. Yeah.
Perfect. Nick, any advice for final bits of advice about genre for writing or marketing even?
I think, well, I'd go on from that point and say that you can take inspiration from or elements from different styles of books. So if you take my last one, The Wrecking Squad, that's inspired by. So you've got the political infighting from Expanse, you've got the camaraderie of Firefly, you've got the action of Aliens. That you're taking a little bit from each and pulling that together. And if that interests you, then that's a possibility. In terms of genre marketing, don't do me would be the first thing. Don't switch too far from your original genre. And you know, in that way, you've got to, if you want to keep some of that audience, because I know we talk about how we feel about what we write and how important it is, but actually, in a way, we do want to sell a few books to have that affirmation that you can write and that it's worth doing. So in a way, it's just being careful with that as well, that you don't switch maybe too soon, or if you do switch, it might be because that actually didn't work for me and I want to go somewhere else. That's fine. But if it has worked, just be careful how you do it. That would be my advice. Don't do what I did.
Michael?
Yeah, sure. As much as I hate labels, and because they make things too easy, they are actually super useful, but not in the way you might expect. These labels, these genres, the subgenres, they're setting up expectations in the reader. And if you know those expectations well, you know how to fuck them up. And that's where all the fun is. So read your genre well, read a lot, and then mess with people.
I think that's the
Spot
perfect
on.
note to end on. So
Absolutely.
read widely and fuck with your readers, people. Thank you all so much for joining us today for this panel and spreading the love and knowledge to the indie community. Before we go, can you please let everyone know where they can find you online? Nick, where can people find you?
Everywhere. nicksnape.com is my website. My books are on Amazon. All my paperbacks are available through most stores via Ingram. So I'm there. From TikTok to X, just search for me.
Krystle, how about you?
Yeah, I'm in a similar boat. The specific combination of my name is pretty unique. So if you go to any platform and search me, you'll probably find me. But I'm most active on Blue Sky and Threads at the moment, and a little bit on Instagram. And then we also have the Dripping Bucket podcast that's currently on YouTube. And eventually, when I get my shit together, I'll get the RSS feed going and distribute it properly. But I don't know. I did something wrong and fucked it up, and now I'm scared to go back. So we're on YouTube, Fletcher and I.
Fletcher, how about you?
Yeah, all the usual: Twitter, Blue Sky, Facebook, Instagram. Michael R. Fletcher. You'll find me.
It's actually hard to find him on some platforms because his handle is usually Fletch God Apocalypse. So sometimes,
yeah, there is that.
Sometimes if you look up Michael Fletcher, you won't actually get him. You'll get some other guy.
There are a million Michael R. Somebody or other.
Yeah. So if you can't find him specifically, try at Fletch God, and then he'll pop up in the search bar. I know this because I keep having to make Dripping Bucket accounts and find him somewhere, and like I can never find him to try to credit him for our work.
Krystle saving the day. And of course, you guys can all also follow SFF Addicts on all the platforms at sffaddictspod. You can follow me, Greta K. Kelly, across Instagram and TikTok mostly, but a little bit on Twitter. And you can buy my books, including my little Heist and Hijinks Chaos Gremlin Queen of Days, wherever books are sold. And that is it for this episode. I managed to not screw anything up too terribly, so yay! Stay tuned next week as Indie Appreciation Month continues with a panel on building your community. Until then, keep writing, keep reading, and imagining, and we'll see you next time on SFF Addicts. Bye!